Really get what the cloud is all about, let's start with a little thought experiment. Just imagine for a second, what if, to power your lights, your TV, your phone, you had to generate your own electricity? Seriously, think about the cost, the complexity, the constant upkeep. It'd be a total nightmare, wouldn't it? Well, believe it or not, that's exactly how things used to be. About 100 years ago, if you owned a factory, you also had to build and run your own power plant. It was crazy expensive, and honestly, a huge distraction from, actually making stuff. But then the utility grid came along, and suddenly you could just plug into a wall, pay for what you use, and get back to business. That one change, absolutely revolutionary.
And that, right there, brings us to today, because the world of computing has gone through the very same revolution. It's had its own electricity moment, and it has completely changed the game for how technology gets delivered and how we use it.
And that is the core idea of the cloud. Just like we all stopped building our own little power plants, companies are now stopping the practice of building their own massive, expensive data centers. You know, those giant warehouses packed with blinking servers? Instead, they're just plugging into a global grid of computing power that someone else manages. So to really appreciate how huge this shift is, let's do a little compare and contrast. Let's look at the old, clunky way of doing things versus the fast, flexible new world of the cloud.
You know, IT infrastructure has always been evolving. We started with these giant mainframes that filled entire rooms. Then came personal computers on our desks, which led to client-server networks and then web apps. Cloud computing is simply the next, and I'd argue, the most powerful stage in that whole journey.
So what was the old way actually like? Oh man, let's say you wanted to launch a new e-commerce website. First, you'd spend months, literally months, in meetings just picking vendors. Then you'd send a purchase order and wait weeks for all the hardware to show up. Then your engineers would spend even more time racking servers, plugging everything in, installing software. It was just an incredibly slow, painful process.
And the result of all that pain? It could take anywhere from 6 to 12 months just to get one project out the door. How are you supposed to innovate or react to your competition when it takes that long just to get the tools you need? You can't. It was a massive roadblock.
This chart right here shows the biggest, ugliest problem of the old model: waste. Companies had to guess what their busiest day of the year would be, say Black Friday, and buy enough server power to handle that absolute peak. But what about the other 364 days of the year? Well, most of that expensive equipment just sat there idle. That huge gap you see between the forecast and the actual usage, that's just pure wasted money. So, how does the cloud fix all this? Well, it's all built on a few really simple but incredibly powerful principles that just flip that old model on its head. So why are businesses all in on the cloud? It really boils down to 4 huge wins. 1, you're just faster. 2, you get amazing flexibility to scale up or down in an instant. 3, and this is a big one, you completely change how you spend money. You stop paying huge upfront capital expenditures, or CapEx, and you move to a pay-as-you-go operational expenditure, or OpEx. It's like switching from buying a car to just calling an Uber when you need one. And finally, you get to focus on what you're actually good at, instead of being a full-time server manager. Okay, let's get a little official for a second. The U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, came up with a formal definition, and it's actually perfect. The key phrases you want to grab onto here are on-demand, shared pool, and configurable. This isn't just about renting a computer. It's a whole new way of delivering a service. NIST also laid out 5 essential rules. If a service doesn't have these, you can't really call it cloud. 1, on-demand self-service. You can get resources whenever you want without talking to a human. 2, broad network access. You can get to it from anywhere. 3, resource pooling. The provider's resources are shared across a ton of customers. 4, rapid elasticity. You can scale up or down, boom, just like that. And 5, measured service. You only pay for what you actually use, kind of like an electricity meter for your computing. Now here's the thing. The cloud isn't just one single thing. It's more like a menu. It comes in different service models or flavors, depending on how much work you want to do yourself versus how much you want the provider to handle for you.
At the very foundation, we have infrastructure as a service, or IaaS. Think of this like renting a plot of digital land. The provider gives you the servers, the storage, the networking, all the raw building blocks, and you can build whatever you want on top of it. This gives you the most control.
Move up one level, and you get Platform as a Service, or PaaS. Here, the provider handles all that base infrastructure plus things like the operating system and development tools. It's like renting a plot of land that already has the foundation poured and the frame of the house built. You just focus on designing the rooms.
And finally, at the top, we have software as a service, or SaaS. And honestly, this is the one most of us use every single day. This is like moving into a fully furnished apartment. You don't build a thing, you just use the application. We're talking about things like Gmail, Microsoft 365, or Zoom. The provider handles everything.
And one last thing, there are different ways these clouds are set up. A public cloud, like AWS or Azure, is shared by everyone. A private cloud is built just for one organization. They get total control, usually for security reasons. A hybrid cloud, as you can probably guess, is a mix of both. And a community cloud is shared by a specific group with common goals, like a bunch of government agencies. So with this huge shift to computing as a utility, who are the new power companies? Who actually rules the cloud? Well, let's start at the top. One single company, Amazon Web Services, or AWS, controls a full third of the entire global cloud market. 33%. Just let that sink in for a second. That's an incredible amount of market share.
When you look at the whole pie, it's a market of giants. The top three, that's AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, together they control over 60% of the entire global market. They are the new utility companies of the digital age, and everyone else is just fighting for the leftovers.
So the big takeaway here is that computing has officially changed from a product you buy to a utility you subscribe to, just like electricity. And that shift has already unleashed an unbelievable amount of innovation, which kind of makes you wonder, as more and more complex things become simple, on-demand services.